Welcome to the bonus show. There were primaries last night, although with so much going on, they did not necessarily get the headlines that some might have imagined. One of the big and important ones was the Republican gubernatorial primary in Wisconsin, where Mickles defeated Kleefisch. And I have to tell you, Pat, that is not a race that I followed closely. Was it a MAGA versus non-MAGA sort of situation?
It was. So Trump pulled off the victory here. He endorsed Mickles. The establishment Republicans, they wanted Kleefisch, who is the, I believe, former lieutenant governor of the state. And so people like Mike Pence endorsed her. And so it was another showdown between the MAGA types and the non-MAGA types. And when you think about the situations where Trump and Pence have endorsed different candidates in a race, it looks like Trump is now 2-1 against Pence because Trump got the win here and also with the Kerry Lake race in Arizona.
Right.
But Pence pulled out a victory in Georgia with David Perdue getting defeated there by Brian Kemp. So I want to see if more of these types of head-to-head matches continue. But as far as it goes for now, Trump is up 2-1 against Pence.
Yep. And of course, what happens in November will have the most electoral importance in the sense of does a Democrat or a Republican actually remain become governor in Wisconsin. And that's one we're going to be following very closely from a gubernatorial standpoint. Now, also interesting in Vermont, Becca Balint will become the first woman to represent the state in Congress. She won the Democratic primary, and the winner of the Democratic primary there is essentially a shoo-in to win in November as well. So that's interesting. In Connecticut, Governor Ned Lamont and Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal both got their Republican challengers, and both are expected to defeat those Republican challengers in November, which I don't think will come as a shock to too many people. And then in Minnesota, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar did win her Democratic primary. She seems to be increasingly having a problem in her district where her margin of victory has shrunk. There's been significant shrinkage over time where she only won by 2% last night, whereas in the past she has won her primary but by as much as 20%. So that's a pretty dramatic shift for Ilhan Omar.
To be honest, I didn't even know about that. And
Yeah.
It makes sense because, her state was having an election. So you'd think that, okay, she's going to be in a contested primary.
Right.
But 2%, you'd think that would be more of a news event going into it, knowing that there was a significant chance of her being ousted from office.
Right.
But it's good news that she was able to fight that off, at least, I guess.
Yeah. She should be worried about 24. I think that's clear with this diminishing margin each time. But I don't know that much about her district, but I assume the winner of the Dem primary wins the district, right? I don't know. Maybe I should Google
the Minneapolis area, so she'll be fine. And then also in Vermont, there's the gubernatorial primary for the Democrats.
Yep.
Brenda Siegel won that one, but she's going to go up against Republican Governor Phil Scott. And Vermont is one of these New England states where they just love to vote in Republican governors, even though they're very progressive states. And Phil Scott is perhaps the most popular governor in the entire country. He has like a 60% approval rating. So Siegel, even though she's a Democrat, she probably isn't going to win that race. We also have that issue in Massachusetts where we have Charlie Baker, very popular Republican, and he won re-election when he ran easily against a Democrat. It's just one of those things that New England likes to vote in Republican governors.
And just a quick note on the 5th Congressional District in Minnesota, Ilhan Omar's district. I just looked. 1963 was the last time that a Republican represented that district. That was Walter Judd, whose 20-year tenure ended in 1963. And since then, it's been Democrats all the way down. Three of them actually to retirement. Keith Ellison retired, but it's sort of like he retired to run for attorney general, and it's kind of retirement has a different meaning when you're as young as he was. But in any case, they all went to retirement, and we will see if Ilhan Omar does the same thing. U.S. lawmakers are looking to crack down on airlines over canceled flights. The proposal from two House Democrats is to make it illegal for airlines to offer flights if they know they don't have the staff, or to cancel flights close to scheduled departures because of an issue that's foreseeable. Now, obviously, if there is a delayed inbound flight So the crew that's coming in is 2 hours late, and this puts them into where they have to have a mandated rest period. That is beyond a foreseeable event, unless it is a very particular situation where they knew that they were going to end up being late. But let's assume it's because of weather, a mechanical issue. Nobody's talking about that. But these airlines have very sophisticated systems for putting together these crew schedules. And some of these staffing issues right now are known to be foreseeable in the sense of the schedule might be the schedule the airline has always had. But if they know they're 8% down on staff, it becomes predictable that some of these flights are highly likely to be canceled. Lawmakers want to punish airlines for doing that. And I have to tell you, Pat, I'm not for overregulation. I do think something needs to be done because everyone I know has been in horrible flight situations in many cases for what seem like foreseeable issues lately.
Oh, totally. Yeah, the last few months have been terrible with canceled flights. And whenever I have a vacation coming up or a trip somewhere, I'm always just like, oh, there's a good chance or at least a decent chance
Yeah.
that I may have to find another flight. So that's annoying and stressful. And you have to wonder, like, is this the type of thing that's getting the attention of people in Congress because they have to fly around the country all the time?
Could be.
Like with so many issues, it seems like you can't get a hold of your congressperson or senator to complain about it, and they drag their feet and don't do much of anything. But I'm sure they've had to deal with the cancellations and the BS responses from the airlines. So with this issue, they're quick to act. So that's good at least.
Yeah. And again, it's not about, I'm not looking for people to lose their jobs. It's just, let's make it function better. And just in the last month, I had my brother's flight from Montreal to LA just canceled 2 hours before, no explanation given, just canceled. Then was rerouted through Dallas and Montreal to Dallas, canceled. Then got on the next Montreal to Dallas, left the gate, sat on the tarmac for 2 hours, back to the gate, canceled. Eventually got on Montreal to Los Angeles. Insane. Friends recently. Listen, the anecdotes don't matter, but almost everybody is saying I had a major issue with a domestic flight or like a Mexico US or Canada US type flight on an American airline.
This sounds to me like cancel culture run amok.
I
Perhaps
agree.
taking on a different meaning of cancel culture.
Oh, it's yeah.
Once we deal with this, then we have to get to the bumping issue as well, where they overbook flights deliberately,
Yep.
knowing that some people will have to cancel their own reservations, and then sometimes you have instances where there's an auction to see who's willing to get off the flight.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced one of those? Because I haven't seen that yet, where they're like haggling. Okay, we'll give you $100 to get off the flight, $200, $500.
I have not seen that on the plane, but I have seen in the gate area that they start saying we need 8 people to volunteer to get on the next one. We're offering X amount. And I've never seen it get crazy. I know that sometimes people will say, well, they offered $100 and then it ended up being 2,000 because they needed to get people off. I've never seen that, even though I've heard about it happening. But I've seen like, hey, we'll give you $250 if you get on the first flight tomorrow morning and put you up in a free hotel and give you $100 in a food voucher. And they got enough volunteers where that's as far as it went.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like $100 for most people, given if they have plans, if
Right.
they have reservations ahead of time, all the hassle, probably not going to be worth it.
Correct.
But if you're talking $250 plus a $100 food voucher and a free stay at a hotel, all of a sudden I'm interested. And
Pat's
definitely when you get up to
considering it
2,000
now.
If you get up to 2,000, you best believe I'm going to be taking that.
Pat will order room service, watch some, J.R. Tolkien movies or whatever, and, turn it into a real party. All right. So anyway, let's see what happens. This is the proposal from Jan Schakowsky and David Cicilline, both members of Congress who I've met, interestingly enough. Jan Schakowsky has actually been on the show, and we will follow it. Most Americans support a national popular vote to decide who becomes president of the United States. Think of how crazy that is. Most Americans, 63%, say the candidate who gets the most votes nationally should become the president. Isn't that an insane point of view, Pat?
Yeah, if only we could just have a national vote to decide how we pick presidents.
Correct.
Because then we'd be able to institute the national popular vote right away. Instead, we have to come up with these other sorts of systems, like thinking about constitutional amendment, a constitutional convention, or what seems to be more likely, the National Interstate Compact, to try to get about the popular vote, effectively doing away with the Electoral College.
That's right. And we'll mention that in a moment. But the bottom line is as follows. Republicans benefit from the Electoral College as it exists today. Now, I know that Trump and others have said if the president was selected by a national popular vote, we would have run the race differently. So you can't just say, oh, this race would have been won by someone else because the entire campaign would have been different. Fine, that may be the case. As it stands, multiple Republicans have become president while losing the popular vote. That includes George W. Bush in the year 2000, who lost the popular vote nationally to Al Gore. It was about, what, 500,000 votes or so, Pat, at the time,
That's right.
I believe?
That's
yeah, about
right.
500,000 votes. And then in 2016, Donald Trump became the president, despite losing the popular vote by, it was about 2.8 or so million votes, something like that.
That's right. Yep.
Now, those are two examples where the winner would have been a Democrat did we have a popular vote. 2020 is also an interesting example because 2020 ended up heavily contested on the basis of a handful of states, even though Joe Biden won the popular vote by 8 million votes. So again, the entire voter fraud, audits, all this stuff, that was only even an issue because of the Electoral College, because were it just a popular vote, listen, 8 million votes were fraudulent in the wrong direction. Now, they probably would have claimed it, Pat, but it would have gotten even less attention. And so I'm in favor of this. 2/3 of Americans are in favor of this. And like many things Americans want, we're probably not going to get it anytime soon.
Definitely not. Not anytime soon. And when you think about the partisan divide, do you think it's the fact that Republicans were able to win 2 recent presidential elections despite losing the popular vote that brings them to support the current system of doing things? Or do you think it's more the fact that the Electoral College system is in the Constitution, and so conservatives like to be constitutional originalists, so they like it from that perspective?
I think it's very demographically oriented. And what I mean by that is the older one is, the more likely, according to this poll, they are to support the current system. And so Republicans skew older. And so I'm sure there's a partisan element to it. I'm sure everything you said is true, but also there is this age element that I think is a factor as well.
What's funny is that people on the right like to claim that we should just live in a meritocracy, that we should do away with equity, and we should just count everything equally. They make that argument when it comes to job applications, when it comes to admissions in universities. But for whatever reason, when it comes to the Electoral College, they're all in support of weighing these rural, whiter states more heavily than they are more
It's
diverse
affirmative
blue
action.
states.
It's
It is.
affirmative action for low population states. That's effectively what it is. And listen, the meritocracy is you get more Americans to vote for you, you become the president. It shouldn't matter whether Wisconsin versus Wyoming versus Florida people are voting for you. Right now, a voter in Wyoming has much more power in terms of their vote than a voter in California proportionally. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and I believe that someone who lives in New York City is just as much of an American as someone who
Absolutely.
is a farmer in Iowa, and so their votes should count equally. And unfortunately, we don't have a system in place here in the U.S. that allows that. There may have been a case to be made for the Electoral College back in the day because it may have been more practical back then, but now we can definitely go by popular vote. We have the means to be able to do that. So it makes a lot of sense. But because it makes sense, that means we're probably going to have to put it off for another 20, 30 years, and then maybe eventually we'll get around to it.
Yeah, I and even then, I don't even
then.
know. But so that's the deal, folks. The American public wants to decide the presidency in that way, and it makes perfect sense to me. Slightly shorter bonus show for you today, but I do look forward to seeing everybody back here tomorrow. See you then.